And also it goes beyond players who are wagering foolishly with their own phones, indirectly through family members, friends, whoever. It gets into the other aspects that gambling can create challenges for the NFL. And these are the things I tried to identify in the last section of Playmakers. It's not just making sure that your officials aren't Tim Donaghy's and directly involved in trying to shave points or rig games, but that they're doing a good enough job that there's never a suggestion that anyone may possibly be corrupted. It's properly handling inside information from something as obvious as the injury reports, which we know are a joke. We know there's inside information to be had there, and the NFL never penalizes anyone. They used to. They never do it anymore because, Mike, they don't want to declare to the world, we got corrupt teams that are breaking the rules. So that's part of it. If they're serious about this, that's something else they have to do. I had someone explain to me, what about a situation where there's a team that scripts its first 15 plays, and the coach has listed the first 15 plays of the game on the whiteboard, and somebody comes in to empty the trash can, and there it is. How do you safeguard that that person isn't going to do something with that information, whether it's a prop bet for the running back that's going to get the ball 7 times in the first 15 snaps, or whatever else may be gleaned from just what happens to be laying around? What are they doing to safeguard this information that isn't publicly available? That's part of it too. So, hey, that's fine. You're going to throw the book at Calvin Ridley over $1,500 in parlay bets, fine. But you are putting yourself in a position where you have a much greater obligation to deal with all these other areas in which true corruption can occur.
So I'll say this, Mike, so I know we need to move on, is every company has a shovel in their hand, right? And it's how much do they want to dig? How much do they actually want to dig in certain situations? Sometimes they'll just nonchalantly move a little dirt, and sometimes they will pound that shovel into the dirt and try and dig a big a hole as they possibly can. So you're right. You're right. So this happened to fall somehow in their lap. But what do they and really other companies, what do they go digging for if there are abnormalities going on?
Best example, 10 years ago this month, the Bountygate scandal. Because the moment we found out what the Saints were caught doing and we understood what it was, and you had all of these accounts of other teams doing the same damn thing, and I said to the NFL, are you investigating these other teams, specifically the teams where Greg Williams had previously been, and guys who had played for Greg Williams, the mastermind, the ringleader of the bounty scandal in New Orleans, had done it elsewhere? Oh, no, we're not investigating that. They plugged that rabbit hole with cement quickly because they got the one team they wanted to make an example out of. And they wanted to be able to say, hey, we really care about player health and safety. Here's the one head that we're going to put on a pike in front of the city walls, and everybody else is getting a pass. And that's what I don't want this to be. I don't want it to be once a year they find a guy who falls into their laps, who they suspend to show that they really care about the problem and are otherwise ignoring all the other problems that are hiding in plain sight that they don't think are a problem, because once a year they find some poor bastard who accidentally or whatever bet on his phone and got caught, and it was easy and it was clean. So that it's really a much deeper issue. And Mike, here's where it's going to lead, I think, eventually. There's going to be an agency, a federal agency that regulates professional sports, just like the SEC, not the Southeastern Conference, but the Securities and Exchange Commission regulates corporate America, whether it's inside information, whatever other abuses are out there. Not that it's a perfect result, but the NFL can't be trusted to police itself on this. It can't be. Eventually, there's going to be some third party that's in a position to make sure that these rules are properly followed and that the sport isn't corrupted by gambling, especially if it's going to make $1 billion a year off of gambling.
So I guess that's going to be the question. What's incentive enough for a third party to do that? What will make somebody want to, be that dog watcher on what's going on? That I don't have the answer to. I don't know how much someone will say, hey, I think there's some abnormalities going on with the most popular sport by far in the country that brings in $15 billion, and that number is only going to go up. People may, you may not have people that want to dig. I don't know, Mike. That's a fair question. And going quickly back, I don't know what you're talking about on bounties. I have no idea why you would bring bounties up. That doesn't happen, Mike.
Never, ever. And look, but everything the NFL does has a strong to incredibly strong element of PR. and certain things get brushed under the rug, like the Washington Commanders situation, like the Dallas Cowboys voyeurism scandal, which we're not investigating that. The Cowboys can be trusted to properly investigate that situation and mete out penalties. We don't need to do that. But they had to act against Calvin Ridley, but this gives them a way to let people know, or at least create the impression that they care and they're going to take it seriously. And they got no choice but to take action because it fell into their laps. But that's where the curtain either does or doesn't get peeled back, and they are or they aren't aggressive about all of the other ways that guys can bet, and it's not easy to spot. And guys can do things that can disseminate inside information to others, and it's not black and white. It's not crystal clear. It's not easily traceable to someone's phone. That's where the challenge is going to be. And, what it's going to take is some major scandal. There's going to be some major scandal, and then that's when Congress is going to swoop in. The SEC didn't even come around until 5 years after the stock market crash in 1929. It's going to take something big like that. And maybe it's the Stephen Ross thing. Maybe if the NFL substantiates it and announces, which I don't know why they have an incentive to do it, but they announced that he did that he really did offer $100,000 per loss to Brian Flores, maybe that's the thing that gets Congress's attention. But it's going to take something big like that turns the integrity of the wagering on the game on its head. This won't do it. And it's good the NFL is taking action, but it's the very tiny little bitty tip of a much bigger iceberg that's looming for the NFL.
Yeah, listen, I agree with you. And there have been enough ownership issue things out there to make people, I know, will be looking at this Calvin Ridley situation and screaming. Again, talking about Stephen Ross, talking about Jerry Jones and the Cowboys and the Warriors, and talking about Snyder and Washington and that cesspool of what's been going on there and what's been done about that. It's still all lingering out there. Yet, man, Calvin Ridley, you got a year, baby. Thanks for admitting it. We appreciate you coming forward. Boom, that's a year. And again, I get it because he broke the rule, but I can also see how people are going to say, wait a minute, man, you got some owners that are accused of or doing some really bad things, and we haven't seen a hammer come down just yet. So, how about we make sure we keep that going, and not just hammer the players. Though in this case, again, I'll say, punishment is required for Calvin Ridley. And again, I wait to see if it does get pulled back a little bit, if the appeal does work and it does get pulled back a little bit. But, until they start looking a little deeper and a little stronger, not letting teams investigate themselves and these frickin' owners, we'll take care of it. Harumph. We'll meter out our own punishment. I mean, come on, man. It's just idiotic.
Well, the commissioner isn't hired and retained and compensated by the players.
That's exactly right.
By anyone. He's got an audience of 32. They're the ones who decide whether or not he has the job, how much he gets paid to keep it, and how long he stays in that job. And there's an entire – I'm not trying to turn this into everybody go by Playmakers Day, but why should I stop now? I've been doing it for 6 months. But there's an entire section of the book about owner scandals and things the NFL has not done, whether it's Jimmy Haslam and the situation with the pilot Flying J rebate prosecution, even though he was never indicted. You could argue there's enough there that maybe there should have been some action taken against him when Jim Irsay was suspended, but not really suspended because he still got to make all of his money. Player gets suspended for 6 weeks. He loses every penny he would have made. Jim Irsay gets suspended for 6 weeks. All that means is he can't go to the game. He still gets 6 weeks of the tens of millions of dollars that are flowing into his coffers. So there's always a double standard there. And Mike, this is, it's a great point that we've kind of stumbled into, and I didn't plan to focus on it, but I'm glad we got there. This is all happening at a time when the league is actively keeping the Washington Commanders situation brushed under the rug and deliberately avoiding doing anything to put any public light on what happened in the cheerleaders' locker room for the Cowboys in 2015. And they're going to swoop right in and hammer Calvin Ridley for a year against that same backdrop. That in and of itself is wrong, and hopefully more people realize it and will say something about it.
Yeah, listen, I agree with you there. And again, what Roger Goodell can do, I don't know the powers if it has to be these independent investigations, which they either do or don't do, or letting the teams investigate is a joke. I mean, unless you want to do that, but also have an independent, investigation as well. I mean, it gets ridiculous. So, yeah, I mean, and that's what I mean. And that's what we've been talking about. There are things out there right now that can be looked at. And I'm glad you keep bringing up your book. And if there's enough pictures in the book, could you please send it to me? Then I'll take a look at it.
There are none, unfortunately.
Oh, God.
Okay, so let's add a few more points on this before we wrap it up. The Falcons acknowledge they first became aware of the situation on February 9th. They've cooperated fully with the investigation since receiving notice, and they support the league's findings and actions. We're moving forward in the 2022 season with the decision that was made. And again, Ridley has appeal rights. Even though he's admitted it, he can still say 1 year is too much. Right. I've freely admitted it. I acknowledge it. And there needs to be some concession, I think. Now you would say, well, what's his choice? What else can he do? He could have tried to come up with some cockamamie excuse that, somebody else grabbed his phone and did it. He didn't do any of that. He admitted to it. He owned up to it. And that should count for something, especially when we consider that no inside information was involved. He wasn't with the team at the time. I'm not saying it makes it right. I'm just saying, Does it really make it a 1 year thing? And that'll all be hammered out in time. Ridley did acknowledge on Twitter that he bet $1,500 in all. He doesn't have a gambling problem. Now, some would say $1,500 in wagers is enough to be a gambling problem, but when you're due to make $11 million this year, I don't know. That's kind of a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, $1,500. Come on, that's nothing to a guy who make $11 million. I mean, yeah. So, and I'm not going to say he has a problem. He did it. If this is the one time he did it, it's hard to think he has a problem. I mean, the problem he has is knowing full well that this was wrong, probably not knowing, A, not thinking he's going to get caught, and B, not knowing that it's going to be he's going to get hammered with a year suspension if that sticks. So really, if they did that investigation, because that's the biggest thing you worry about is a couple things. Certainly insider information, number one, or a player getting too deep into gambling where they start losing money and then they're going to start owing favors to somebody and start doing things about it on the field. Those are obviously, things that can corrupt the game, and that's something the NFL or no sport would want. But if you've already proven, or at least said through our investigation, there was no real insider information, then you got to believe there's got to be degrees to a punishment. And maybe to the NFL, their lightest punishment might be a year. And if there was insider information, if they subpoenaed phone records or if he gave up phone records and he was calling other teams, maybe it would be longer than that. I don't know. That's why I'm interested now to see where this ends up after he appeals.
Mike, the point you make, and it's a great one, the team should not be allowed to investigate themselves on issues of misconduct. And that point came up 4 weeks ago when the commissioner said, no, we're not going to let Daniel Snyder investigate the new allegations against Daniel Snyder. But then a week later, well, okay, the Cowboys investigated the allegations against them. We're fine with that. It's broader when it applies to the league in a situation like this. When you have a gambling scandal that makes the whole league look bad, that threatens the league with action by Congress or a prosecution, that's when you have to question whether or not the league is equipped to engage in an investigation that will be against its best interest, that could lead to disclosures that will cause major problems for the league. So for the same reasons you can't trust a team to investigate itself, you can't trust a league to investigate itself when the league knows the potential consequences of discovering and then announcing to the world a major gambling scandal. Not one guy who's away from his team and placing bets on his phone in Florida when his team's otherwise moved on without him. Something that really would raise issues of integrity of the game, games being fixed, information being sold or otherwise corrupted. Will the NFL, this is what I'm going to keep coming back to, when the NFL is confronted with evidence to suggest something like that's happening, will it engage in a full, complete, and objective investigation, or will the investigation be shaded? Will it be directed in a certain way? Will it be aimed at not ending up in a major problem for the NFL? That's why I'm saying it's going to take a third party to regulate the NFL, because only a third party can properly investigate a scandal like that.
That's what I agree, and that's why I think it should be for big situations, and I guess then it would be up to someone to define big enough to have an independent investigation. And then, if you have an independent investigation, should that become public? so then everybody can see what was going on. And I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one. Sometimes I try and act like one, but I don't know I don't know, because if it's private companies, public companies, if you can make things public like that, I don't know. But step one, and I agree with you, and I think a lot of people would agree, that they should be independent investigations in some of these situations.
The bottom line is this. The people who work at the league office are stewards of the game, but sometimes things can happen that can cause people to put their own interests above the interests of the game, and they want to protect themselves. They don't want to get themselves in scrutiny. They don't want to be asked any tough questions about what they did or didn't do, or how they may have been asleep at the switch when these things were happening, so they shade the process away from anything that would get them in trouble. And we try to hold those folks accountable by asking tough questions and making harsh, when necessary, critiques of the way things are handled. And we'll be here. We'll be here to do it if and when it happens. Hopefully it won't. Hopefully everybody follows the rules. But as we learned today, that doesn't happen all the time.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.